The massive alien ship called Nexus Prime floated in deep space like a metal city among the stars. Inside its gleaming halls, creatures from 12 different worlds gathered for the latest cooperation exercise. Commander Xyloth stood at the front of the main meeting room, his crystal body catching the light as he spoke to the mixed group of beings. Jake Morrison sat in the back row, feeling small among the alien representatives. The human wore his standard blue uniform and tried not to stare at his strange companions. To his left sat a klaxon, an insect-like creature with 4 arms and compound eyes that never stopped moving. Its shell gleamed like polished metal. To his right, a luminary floated without touching the chair, its energy form shifting between blue and white light. The room buzzed with different languages being translated through universal communicators. Jake watched as a plant-like Verdani stretched its vine arms toward the ceiling lights. Behind him, an aquatic depths delegate sat in a water-filled tank on wheels, its tentacles tapping against the glass. Xyloth spoke in his musical crystal voice about the importance of interspecies cooperation. Jake had heard similar speeches before. Humans had joined the Galactic Council only 3 years ago, making them the newest and least experienced members. Most aliens treated humans like children who had just learned to walk. Each species brings unique strengths to our alliance, Xyloth continued. The klaxons excel at precise engineering. The luminari master energy manipulation. The Verdani create living structures. The depths understand fluid dynamics better than anyone. Jake noticed that Xyloth did not mention humans at all. This happened often during council meetings. Other species had thousands of years of spaceflight experience while humans had barely figured out faster-than-light travel. A klaxon delegate named Vrex clicked its mandibles and spoke. What specialty do humans claim to possess? Your technology is primitive compared to ours. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Jake felt all eyes turning toward him. Some beings showed curiosity, while others displayed what looked like amusement. The luminary's energy form flickered in patterns that Jake had learned meant mild interest. Jake stood up slowly and cleared his throat. We adapt quickly to new situations. We solve problems in creative ways. We work well under pressure. This answer caused a wave of chittering from the klaxons. Their compound eyes reflected light as they turned to look at each other. The sound reminded Jake of insects laughing. A Verdani delegate named Sylphus rustled its leaves in what Jake recognized as dismissive behavior. Adaptation is merely survival instinct, Sylphus said in its whispering voice. Any primitive species can adapt. We manipulate genetics to create perfect solutions. The klaxons build structures that last for millennia. True advancement requires specialized knowledge. Jake sat back down and said nothing more. He had learned that arguing with advanced species usually made things worse. Better to let his actions speak for themselves when the time came. Xyloth raised one crystal hand for attention. Tomorrow we begin our emergency shelter exercise. Each participant will demonstrate their species' approach to rapid habitat construction. This drill tests your ability to create safe temporary housing in hostile environments. The Crystal Commander activated a holographic display showing a dangerous-looking planet. Jagged mountains rose from purple forests, while storms raged across orange skies. Planet K7742 presents multiple challenges: extreme temperatures, toxic atmosphere, aggressive wildlife, and unstable ground conditions. Jake studied the rotating image carefully. The planet looked deadly, but he noticed interesting details that others might miss. Dense tree canopies provided natural protection. Vine-like plants appeared strong and flexible. The forest structure offered multiple elevation levels. Standard shelter construction typically requires 48 hours, Xyloth explained. The klaxons hold the current record at 36 hours for basic safety compliance. Each species will work independently in separate zones. Vrex clicked proudly at the mention of the klaxon record. Other delegates began discussing their construction methods. The Luminari spoke about energy barrier matrices. The Verdani planned genetic modifications for local plants. The depths considered underwater alternatives. Jake listened to their complex plans while continuing to study the planet data. His fellow humans had always approached problems differently than other species. Where aliens saw obstacles, humans often found opportunities. Where others built stronger, humans built smarter. The meeting ended with species delegates returning to their quarters to finalize preparation. Jake walked through the ship's corridors past groups of aliens, discussing elaborate construction techniques. Their methods sounded impressive but also complicated and time-consuming. In his small human quarters, Jake pulled up more detailed scans of K7742. He focused on the forest canopy structure and local vegetation analysis. The vines showed excellent tensile strength. The trees grew in patterns that suggested natural load distribution. Most importantly, the canopy provided protection from both ground predators and atmospheric dangers. While other species planned to fight against the hostile environment, Jake began considering how to work with it instead. Humans had survived on Earth by using what nature provided rather than trying to dominate it completely. This approach had served his species well through ice ages, floods, droughts, and countless other challenges. As Jake prepared for sleep, he wondered if the Galactic Council was ready to see what human creativity could accomplish when given the right opportunity. The next morning brought all delegates to the main briefing chamber aboard Nexus Prime. Sub-Commander Thys slithered to the front platform, her serpentine body moving with fluid grace. The Nagari officer's scales shifted from green to blue as she addressed the gathered representatives. "Today's exercise will test your emergency response capabilities," Thys announced, her forked tongue flicking as she spoke. Planet K7742 represents the type of hostile world where emergency shelters become matters of life and death. A massive holographic display materialized above the delegates, showing detailed scans of the planet's surface. Jake leaned forward in his seat, absorbing every detail while other species delegates took notes on their various recording devices. "The planet experiences thermal storms every 6 hours," Thys continued. "Ground temperatures can rise 200 degrees in minutes. The atmosphere contains corrosive elements that damage most standard building materials. Local wildlife includes pack hunters that attack anything on the ground level." The klaxon delegate, Vrex, raised one of his 4 arms. "What construction materials will be provided?" "None," Thys replied with what might have been a smile. "You must use only what the planet provides. This tests true adaptability and resourcefulness." This announcement caused concerned murmurs among several species. The Luminari's energy form flickered rapidly, indicating stress. The aquatic depths delegate moved nervously in its water tank. Jake felt excitement rather than worry. Humans had always excelled at making something from nothing. Military training had taught him to see opportunity where others saw limitation. This activated another holographic section showing the testing zones. Each species receives a designated area approximately 1 square kilometer in size. Your shelter must accommodate 50 individuals safely for extended periods. You will be monitored, but not assisted. The Serpentine Commander's display showed previous shelter designs from past exercises. The klaxons typically built geometric structures using precise engineering calculations. Their shelters looked like metal fortresses with thick walls and small windows. Construction time averaged 36 to 40 hours. The Verdani grew living buildings by modifying local plant life through genetic manipulation. Their shelters appeared organic and beautiful, but required complex biological processes. Average completion time ran 42 hours. The Luminari created energy domes that repelled environmental dangers through pure force. These barriers looked impressive, but demanded constant energy input to maintain. They usually finished in 38 hours. Jake studied each approach while noting their common limitations. All species focused on creating barriers between inhabitants and the environment. They built fortresses designed to withstand attack rather than structures that worked with natural systems. "Human Delegate Morrison," This called out suddenly. "Do you have questions about the parameters?" Jake stood and looked around the room. Every alien eye focused on him with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed amusement. "What are the exact specifications for inhabitant safety?" "Protection from thermal storms, atmospheric toxins, and predator attacks," Thais replied. "Adequate space for 50 beings with basic life support functions. Any restrictions on construction, methods, or structural design?" This question seemed to surprise the Nagari commander. Her scales shifted to yellow, which Jake had learned indicated confusion. "No restrictions beyond using available planetary resources. Why do you ask?" "Just clarifying the rules," Jake said, and sat back down. The other delegates exchanged glances that clearly questioned human intelligence. Vrex clicked his mandibles in what sounded like mechanical laughter. "Perhaps humans need simpler parameters to understand the challenge." Jake ignored the insult and continued studying the planetary data. While other species planned elaborate constructions, he focused on understanding the environment itself. The forest canopy grew in 3 distinct layers. Vine species showed remarkable strength and flexibility. Tree spacing suggested natural wind resistance patterns. Most interesting were the thermal storm characteristics. The dangerous heat affected ground level but dissipated rapidly with altitude. Predators hunted primarily in the lower forest areas. The canopy provided natural protection from both threats. "Transport to the planet begins in 2 hours," Thais announced. "You will have access to basic tools and emergency supplies. Construction time begins upon planetary arrival." Delegates began filing out to make final preparations. Jake overheard conversations about material calculations, structural engineering, and resource allocation. Every species approached the challenge, like a construction project requiring precise planning and execution. In his quarters, Jake reviewed human military engineering principles instead of construction blueprints. Speed mattered more than permanence in emergency situations. Adaptability trumped rigid design. Working with natural forces proved more effective than fighting against them. He thought about survival training exercises where soldiers built shelters in minutes rather than hours. The key was recognizing what the environment offered instead of imposing preconceived solutions. Earth's military had learned hard lessons about rapid deployment under hostile conditions. Jake pulled up detailed scans of K7742's vegetation. The vine species showed tensile strength comparable to manufactured rope. Tree branch patterns indicated excellent load-bearing potential. The multi-level canopy structure provided natural frameworks for suspended construction. While other species planned to build upward from the ground, Jake considered building throughout the 3-dimensional space of the forest. Instead of creating barriers against the environment, he could work with natural systems that already provided protection. The more Jake studied the data, the more excited he became. Other species saw a hostile planet requiring defensive construction. Jake saw a living framework that could support innovative solutions. As transport time approached, Jake felt confident about his unconventional approach. The Galactic Council had never seen human military engineering in action. They were about to learn that sometimes the best defense was not building walls, but working with what nature already provided. The other delegates prepared for a 48-hour construction marathon. Jake prepared to show them what 20 minutes of human creativity could accomplish. The transport ships descended through K7742's turbulent atmosphere like metal raindrops falling toward the purple forest below. Jake pressed his face against the viewport window, watching the alien landscape grow larger as they approached the surface. Twisted trees reached toward orange clouds, while thermal vents released steam across the rocky terrain. The ship touched down in a clearing surrounded by dense vegetation. Jake felt the artificial gravity shift as planetary conditions took over. Through his environmental suit, he could hear the distant sounds of alien wildlife calling to each other through the forest. "All delegates proceed to your designated zones," announced the ship's artificial intelligence. "Monitoring drones are now active. Construction time begins upon zone entry." Jake gathered his basic toolkit and emergency supplies before following the other species out of the transport. The planet's air felt thick and humid even through his protective gear. Thermal sensors showed ground temperature at 80 degrees, but rising as the next storm cycle approached. Each species headed toward their assigned testing areas, while observation drones followed overhead like mechanical birds. Jake watched his fellow delegates disappear into different sections of the forest before turning toward his own zone marker. The Klaxon team moved with military precision toward their area, carrying surveying equipment and soil analysis tools. Their leader, Vrex, barked orders at his three assistants as they began immediate ground preparation. Jake could see them starting excavation work for foundation placement. The Verdani delegate, Sylphus, approached her zone more slowly, pausing to examine local plant species. Her vine-like arms stretched out to touch tree bark and leaf surfaces as she began selecting candidates for genetic modification. The process would take hours to complete properly. Jake's assigned area lay deeper in the forest where the canopy grew thicker overhead. Ancient trees created natural columns, while vines hung like ready-made rope between branches. The ground showed signs of regular flooding, which explained why local wildlife preferred the elevated forest levels. Instead of beginning construction immediately, Jake started walking through his zone in a pattern that must have looked random, to the monitoring drones. He tugged on hanging vines to test their strength. He examined branch connections to understand natural load distribution. He studied the three-level canopy structure and noted wind patterns in the leaves. Back on Nexus Prime, the monitoring team watched multiple screens showing each species' progress. Commander Xyloth observed the displays with scientific interest, while Subcommander Thys slithered between workstations. "The Klaxons have begun foundation excavation," reported a technician. "Estimated completion time 34 hours based on current progress. The Verdani has started genetic sequencing of local flora," added another observer. "Initial modifications should complete in 6 hours. Thys paused at the screen showing Jake's activities. "What is the human doing?" "He appears to be wandering aimlessly through his zone." The monitoring technician adjusted his instruments and frowned. "Unclear, Subcommander. He has not begun any recognizable construction activities. Current behavior patterns do not match standard emergency shelter protocols." On another screen, the luminary delegate had started gathering ambient energy from the planet's electromagnetic field. Bright patterns of light swirled around the floating being as it began establishing power matrices for barrier construction. The depth's representative worked from a mobile water tank, using mechanical arms to test soil moisture and drainage patterns. Aquatic species required careful water management for any shelter design. Jake continued his examination of the forest structure, apparently oblivious to the time pressure that drove other species toward rapid construction. He climbed part way, up several trees to test branch strength and flexibility. He measured distances between natural anchor points using simple pacing. "The human's behavior is highly irregular," Xyloth observed, his crystal body reflecting concern. "Perhaps humans lack proper training in emergency construction techniques." Other species had already begun visible progress on their shelters. The Klaxons worked with machine-like efficiency, their excavation nearly complete. The Verdani had successfully modified her first set of construction plants. The Luminari's energy barriers were taking shape around a central gathering area. Jake finally stopped his wandering and pulled out his toolkit. The monitoring team leaned forward with interest, expecting to see standard construction beginning. Instead, Jake began cutting vine segments and sorting them by length and thickness. "Is he making rope?" asked a technician. "Impossible," Thys replied. "Rope construction is a primitive technique. No advanced species uses such methods for emergency shelter. Jake worked quickly now, his movements becoming purposeful and directed. He began with the thickest vines, using military knots to create connection points between major trees. His hands moved with practiced skill as he secured anchor lines at different canopy levels. The monitoring team watched in confusion as Jake's activities bore no resemblance to conventional shelter construction. He seemed to be creating some kind of web or net structure throughout the forest space, rather than building walls or barriers. "Should we intervene?" asked a junior technician. "The human appears to be constructing a trap rather than a shelter." Xyloth raised one crystal hand for patience. "Let us observe. Perhaps humans have unconventional methods we do not understand." Meanwhile, other species continued their methodical approaches. The Klaxons had begun wall placement using processed, local materials. Their structure would be solid and durable, but required many more hours of precise work. The Verdani had successfully grown the first sections of living wall, but the biological processes needed time to develop strength and stability. Her shelter would be beautiful and environmentally integrated, but could not be rushed. Jake moved through his zone like a spider weaving an enormous web. He connected vines between trees at multiple levels, creating a three-dimensional framework that used the entire forest space. Each connection point was carefully placed to distribute weight and provide multiple load paths. The thermal sensors began showing rising ground temperatures as the next storm cycle approached. Other species noted the change and accelerated their work schedules. Thermal storms could damage incomplete structures and set construction schedules back by hours. Jake seemed unconcerned by the approaching danger. He continued his vine work with steady concentration, building upward and outward simultaneously. His structure began taking shape as something unprecedented in Galactic Council records. "What exactly is the human creating?" Thais asked, her scales shifting to yellow confusion. The monitoring technician studied his instruments and shook his head. "Unknown, Subcommander. The structure does not match any known shelter design in our databases." As other species worked against time to complete their defensive barriers, Jake worked with the forest itself to create something entirely new. The monitoring team watched with growing amazement as the humans' unconventional approach began revealing its true purpose. Jake's hands moved with increasing speed as his vine network took shape throughout the forest canopy. What had started as random-looking connections began revealing itself as an intricate three-dimensional structure that used every available tree, branch, and natural anchor point. The monitoring team aboard Nexus Prime watched their displays with growing fascination. Jake's construction bore no resemblance to anything in their extensive databases of emergency shelter designs. Instead of building walls against the environment, he was creating something that worked with the forest itself. 15 minutes elapsed, reported a technician. "All species except humans show expected progress patterns." Commander Xyloth moved closer to Jake's monitoring screen. "Increase magnification on the human's construction zone. I want to understand what he is building." The enhanced view revealed the true scope of Jake's project. He had created a network of vine platforms suspended at different levels throughout the forest canopy. The platforms connected to each other through carefully woven walkways that followed natural tree growth patterns. Jake moved through his suspended structure with practiced ease, testing each platform before moving to the next connection point. His military training showed in every movement as he checked load distribution and structural integrity with quick but thorough inspections. "Remarkable," whispered Thais, her serpentine body coiling with interest. "The human is not building a shelter. He is building a city." The structure continued growing as Jake added more platforms and connection points. Each new section integrated seamlessly with the existing framework while expanding the total capacity. The design could accommodate far more than 50 individuals, if needed. Jake began adding specialized sections to his suspended city. He wove storage areas using basket weaving techniques. He created waste management systems that utilized natural drainage patterns. He even constructed recreational spaces, where inhabitants could gather safely above the dangerous ground level. 18 minutes elapsed, announced the technician. Other species remained focused on their traditional approaches, unaware that the human was redefining emergency shelter construction. The Klaxons continued their precise wall assembly. The Verdani waited for biological processes to strengthen her living structure. The Luminari maintained steady energy flow to their barrier matrices. Jake reached the final phase of his construction as thermal sensors showed rapidly rising temperatures. The approaching storm would test every shelter's ability to protect its inhabitants. Ground temperature had already risen 50 degrees and continued climbing. With practiced efficiency, Jake began adding the final protective elements to his suspended city. He wove a canopy covering using smaller vines and broad leaves to provide overhead protection. The natural forest canopy above provided additional shielding from thermal radiation. Multiple entry and exit points allowed rapid evacuation if needed. The suspended design eliminated concerns about ground-based predators or flooding. The flexible vine construction could absorb seismic activity without structural failure. 19 minutes, called the technician, his voice showing disbelief. Jake performed his final safety check by moving through every section of his creation. He bounced on platforms to test structural integrity. He pulled on connection points to verify load distribution. He examined knotwork to ensure proper tension and security. The suspended city swayed gently in the forest breeze, but remained completely stable. The structure demonstrated elegant engineering principles that combined human ingenuity with natural materials and environmental advantages. 20 minutes, 15 seconds, announced the technician as Jake activated his communicator. Human Delegate Morrison reporting, Jake said calmly into his device. Emergency shelter construction complete and ready for occupancy. The monitoring room fell into absolute silence. Every alien eye stared at the displays showing Jake's impossible achievement. The human had completed a functional habitat in less time than most species needed for basic foundation work. Impossible. Vrex clicked. From his construction zone, where Klaxon workers continued their methodical wall assembly. No structure can be completed in 20 minutes. Xyloth activated the communication system. Human Morrison, please confirm your shelter meets all safety requirements for 50 inhabitants. Jake tested his structure one more time before responding. Confirmed, Commander. Structure provides protection from thermal storms, atmospheric toxins, and ground predators. Capacity exceeds 50 individuals with dedicated areas for all necessary functions. The thermal storm arrived with devastating force, sending ground temperatures soaring past dangerous levels. Toxic atmospheric elements began concentrating near the surface, while predatory creatures retreated to underground dens. Jake's suspended city remained completely unaffected by the surface chaos. The elevated position protected inhabitants from ground-level dangers, while the forest canopy provided natural shielding from atmospheric hazards. Other species scrambled to protect their incomplete constructions from storm damage. The Klaxons covered their work with emergency barriers. The Verdani used energy shields to protect vulnerable biological processes. The Luminari increased power to their defensive matrices. Jake sat comfortably on one of his platforms, watching the storm, rage below while remaining perfectly safe in his suspended refuge. The structure swayed slightly with wind gusts, but showed no signs of stress or instability. Analysis complete, reported the monitoring technician after running safety algorithms on Jake's construction. The human shelter exceeds all minimum requirements and provides superior protection compared to traditional designs. Thais stared at the readings in amazement. How is this possible? Our best engineers require days to achieve similar results. Xyloth studied the data with scientific fascination. The human has demonstrated principles we never considered. Instead of fighting environmental challenges, he incorporated them into his solution. The thermal storm passed after 2 hours, leaving other species to resume their interrupted construction work. Jake's shelter had weathered the crisis without any damage or loss of functionality. As monitoring drones captured detailed scans of the suspended city, the Galactic Council realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. Human engineering principles had just revolutionized their understanding of emergency construction. The implications would reshape emergency response protocols throughout the galaxy. But first, they needed to understand how one human had accomplished in 20 minutes what their best engineers could not achieve in 2 days. The aftermath of Jake's demonstration sent shockwaves through every level of the Galactic Council hierarchy. Emergency protocols that had remained unchanged for thousands of years suddenly required complete review. The concept of adaptive construction, using environmental advantages, became an entirely new field of scientific study. Commander Xyloth called an immediate meeting of all senior council members while the exercise continued on K7742. The crystal being's body reflected his agitation as he addressed the assembled leadership through holographic projection. The human achievement challenges our fundamental understanding of emergency engineering, Xyloth announced to the council chamber. We must determine if this represents reproducible methodology or individual exceptional performance. Admiral E. Korath of the Nagari fleet coiled her massive serpentine body around her communication platform. One human cannot invalidate millennia of proven construction techniques. Perhaps the monitoring equipment malfunctioned. Negative, replied Chief Technician Voss from his monitoring station. All instruments functioned properly. The human shelter meets or exceeds safety requirements while demonstrating structural innovations we never considered possible. The council chamber buzzed with concerned discussion as members reviewed the detailed analysis data. Jake's suspended city showed engineering principles that combined simplicity with effectiveness in ways that challenged traditional approaches. Back on K7742, other species delegates requested permission to examine the human construction. Jake welcomed visitors to his suspended city, explaining his techniques with patient enthusiasm. The response varied dramatically between species. Vrex and his Klaxon team arrived first, their compound eyes reflecting amazement as they studied. The Vine Network. This violates established load distribution principles, Vrex clicked. Yet structural analysis confirms superior stability compared to our geometric designs. Jake guided the insectoid engineers through his platform system, demonstrating how each connection point shared stress loads with multiple pathways. Military engineering teaches us to build redundancy into every system. If one connection fails, others compensate automatically. The Klaxon team spent hours analyzing Jake's knotwork and tension distribution. Their precise minds struggled to understand how seemingly chaotic construction could achieve such mathematical elegance. Every measurement confirmed that human methods produced results their computers had not predicted. Sylphis arrived with her Verdani research team, her vine-like arms exploring the organic integration between Jake's structure and the living forest. You work with natural systems rather than modifying them, she observed with newfound respect. Plants already know how to grow strong, Jake explained. We just helped them support what we needed instead of forcing them to become something different. The Verdani examination revealed sophisticated understanding of biological principles that their genetic manipulation approach had overlooked. Jake's methods achieved environmental harmony without requiring complex modifications or extended growth periods. The Luminari delegate approached with curious energy patterns flickering around its form. Your construction requires no external power source yet provides superior protection. This challenges our barrier methodology fundamentally. Jake showed how the suspended design used gravity and natural wind patterns for stability instead of fighting against environmental forces. Sometimes the best defense is not building stronger walls, but building in places where you don't need walls at all. Within hours, requests for human engineering consultations flooded the Galactic Council communication systems. Military commanders wanted rapid deployment techniques. Colonial administrators needed adaptive construction methods. Emergency response teams required training in environmental integration approaches. The council reconvened with expanded membership as news of the human achievements spread throughout the galaxy. Species representatives who had previously ignored human contributions now demanded detailed technical briefings. "We must establish immediate exchange programs with human engineers," declared Counselor Thyra of the Aquatic Depths. "Our underwater construction methods could benefit from adaptive principles the human demonstrated." Admiral Korath had changed her position completely after reviewing the data. "The Nagari fleet requires training in rapid shelter deployment for planetary operations. Human techniques could save countless lives during emergency evacuations." Even the proud Klaxons requested formal cooperation agreements. "Our precision engineering combined with human adaptability could revolutionize construction throughout the galaxy," Vrex admitted during his official report. Jake found himself transported back to Nexus Prime for immediate debriefing with the full council leadership. The chamber that had seemed dismissive of human capabilities now treated him with respectful attention. "Explain the principles behind your construction methodology," Xyloth requested, his crystal form reflecting genuine scientific interest. Jake stood before the assembled representatives and began describing human military engineering philosophy. "We learned that speed often matters more than permanence in emergency situations. We adapt to circumstances instead of trying to control them completely." He explained how Earth's harsh environments had taught humans to work with natural forces rather than against them. Military survival training emphasized using available resources creatively instead of depending on manufactured materials. "The forest already provided everything needed for safe shelter," Jake continued. "The canopy protected from above. The trees offered structural support. The vines gave us connection materials. We just organized what nature had already supplied." The AIDA Council listened with growing amazement as Jake described human approaches to problem-solving. Where other species saw obstacles requiring technological solutions, humans found opportunities for creative adaptation. "Your methods suggest entirely new emergency response paradigms," Xyloth observed. "We must integrate human techniques into our standard protocols immediately." The meeting concluded with authorization for expanded human participation in Galactic Council engineering projects. Jake's 20-minute achievement had transformed humanity's status from junior species to innovation leaders. As species delegates prepared to return to their home worlds, they carried with them new understanding of human capabilities. The galaxy was about to discover that sometimes the best solutions came not from advanced technology, but from creative thinking and environmental harmony. The suspended city on K7742 would become a permanent research station, serving as a lasting monument to human ingenuity and the value of thinking beyond conventional limitations. 3 months after the K7742 demonstration, Jake found himself standing in the largest teaching facility aboard Nexus Prime. The chamber had been specially modified to accommodate representatives from over 30 different species, all eager to learn human construction techniques. The transformation in alien attitudes amazed Jake daily. Species that had previously dismissed human capabilities now competed for access to human engineering knowledge. The same beings who had laughed at his mention of adaptability now treated him like a respected professor. "Today we examine load, distribution in flexible structures," Jake announced to his mixed species class. Behind him, holographic displays showed various rope and vine configurations that could support different weight loads. In the front row, Vrex took detailed notes, with 2 of his 4 arms while using his other appendages to manipulate practice materials. The Klaxon engineer had become one of Jake's most dedicated students, constantly seeking to understand the mathematical principles hidden within seemingly chaotic human methods. "The key difference," Jake explained, "is that rigid structures concentrate stress at specific points, while flexible structures distribute forces throughout the entire system." A luminary student flickered with patterns indicating confusion. How do you calculate precise load limits without mathematical modeling? Jake smiled and picked up a length of vine from his demonstration materials. Watch and feel instead of calculating first. He began weaving the vine into a simple net pattern. Each strand shares the load with its neighbors. The more connections you make, the stronger the whole system becomes. This hands-on approach initially frustrated species accustomed to theoretical analysis before practical application. However, as students began working with actual materials, they discovered the intuitive logic behind human techniques. Sylphis raised one vine-like arm from her position in the middle section. Human methods require understanding material properties through direct interaction rather than laboratory analysis. This knowledge cannot be programmed into construction machines. Exactly, Jake confirmed. Every vine, every branch, every piece of material has unique characteristics. You learn to read these differences through experience rather than assuming uniform properties. The teaching sessions had evolved far beyond basic construction techniques. Jake found himself explaining human philosophy about working with nature, rather than dominating it. These concepts challenged fundamental assumptions that had guided alien engineering for millennia. A depths representative in a mobile water tank raised a tentacle. Aquatic construction faces different challenges than terrestrial building. How do human principles apply to underwater environments? Jake activated a holographic display showing underwater rope and anchor systems used by Earth's naval forces. The same principles work in any environment. Water has currents like wind. Underwater plants can provide materials like surface vegetation. The key is understanding what each environment offers. The diversity of species in his classes constantly amazed Jake. Crystalline beings from mineral-rich worlds learned alongside gaseous entities from nebula environments. Each species brought unique perspectives while sharing common needs for rapid shelter construction. Between formal classes, Jake received private consultations from military commanders and emergency response leaders. These sessions focused on specific applications of human techniques to real-world scenarios. Admiral Korath had become a regular visitor, seeking ways to improve Nagari fleet emergency protocols. Your rapid deployment methods could revolutionize planetary evacuation procedures, she explained during one meeting. Current shelter construction requires transport of heavy equipment and manufactured materials. Jake demonstrated how local materials could substitute for manufactured components in most emergency situations. Every world has something that can be adapted for shelter construction. Plants, minerals, even atmospheric condensation can provide building materials if you know how to use them. These consultations led to field tests on various worlds where human techniques proved effective in dramatically different environments. Ice worlds provided crystal formations for structural elements. Desert planets offered sand and mineral compounds for construction. Gas giant moons had atmospheric resources for inflatable shelter systems. The success stories multiplied throughout the galaxy as species implemented human-inspired construction methods. Emergency response times improved dramatically. While resource requirements decreased significantly, colonies could establish safe shelters immediately upon arrival rather than waiting for equipment shipments. Jake's reputation spread beyond engineering circles as word of human adaptability reached other fields. Diplomatic corps sought training in flexible negotiation techniques. Trade organizations wanted to learn adaptive commerce methods. Even military strategists studied human approaches to unconventional problem-solving. The Galactic Council formally established the Human Engineering Institute with Jake as its first director. The facility would train instructors from every member species in adaptive construction principles. These instructors would then return to their home worlds to spread human techniques throughout their own populations. During the Institute's opening ceremony, Commander Xyloth addressed the assembled delegates with obvious satisfaction. The human achievement demonstrates that advancement comes not only from technological superiority, but from innovative thinking and environmental harmony. Jake accepted the appointment with characteristic humility. Humans learned these techniques through necessity during our planet's dangerous history. We're honored to share this knowledge with species who can improve and expand upon our basic methods. The ceremony concluded with demonstrations by the first graduating class of alien instructors. Vrex showed how klaxon precision could enhance human flexibility for superior results. Sylphus demonstrated biological integration techniques that exceeded purely human methods. The Luminari displayed energy-enhanced rope systems that combined the best of both approaches. As Jake watched his former students become teachers themselves, he realized that human influence on galactic engineering would extend far beyond his individual contributions. Each species would adapt human principles to their own capabilities, creating hybrid techniques that surpassed what any single species could achieve alone. The galaxy was learning that cooperation and adaptation could accomplish more than competition and dominance. Human methods had provided the catalyst, but the real revolution lay in how different species combined their unique strengths with adaptive principles. The suspended city on K7742 continued operating as a research station, but now it served as just one example among hundreds of innovative structures throughout the galaxy that used human-inspired techniques to achieve remarkable results. 6 months after establishing the Human Engineering Institute, Jake discovered that alien interest in human methods extended far beyond construction techniques. The principles of adaptability and environmental harmony had begun influencing every aspect of galactic civilization. Jake received an urgent communication from Admiral Korath requesting immediate consultation on a developing crisis. The Nagari fleet faced a complex diplomatic situation on the border world of Kepler Station, where 3 different species claimed territorial rights to the same resource-rich system. Traditional diplomatic protocols have failed, Korath explained, during their secure communication link. Each species demands exclusive control using legal precedents that contradict each other. Military intervention would cause more problems than it solves. Jake studied the situation reports while considering how human adaptability principles might apply to diplomatic challenges. What resources does each species actually need from the disputed system? This question surprised the Serpentine Admiral. They all claim need for the rare mineral deposits on the 4th planet. Standard procedure awards territorial control to the species with the strongest legal claim. But what do they need the minerals for? Jake pressed. Understanding the underlying requirements might reveal solutions that satisfy everyone without requiring exclusive territorial control. The investigation revealed fascinating details that traditional diplomatic analysis had overlooked. The Klaxons needed the minerals for precision manufacturing equipment. The Verdani required specific compounds for genetic research. The crystalline Zephirites wanted the materials for energy storage systems. Jake proposed a revolutionary approach based on human resource-sharing concepts developed during Earth's scarcity periods. Instead of fighting over who controls the system, why not establish cooperative extraction and processing facilities that serve all 3 species' needs? The suggestion initially met resistance from all parties involved. Exclusive territorial control had been the standard approach to resource disputes for thousands of years. The concept of shared facilities challenged fundamental assumptions about interspecies competition. However, detailed analysis revealed that cooperative resource extraction would actually benefit all 3 species more than exclusive control. Shared costs would reduce individual expenses, while combined expertise would improve extraction efficiency and processing capabilities. Within 2 months, the Kepler Station crisis had transformed from potential military confrontation into a model of interspecies cooperation. The successful resolution impressed the Galactic Council so much that they requested human consultation on dozens of similar disputes throughout the galaxy. Jake found himself traveling between worlds as a diplomatic advisor, teaching alien negotiators how adaptability principles could resolve conflicts that traditional methods had failed to address. The key insight was focusing on underlying needs rather than stated positions. On the aquatic world of Tethys Deep, territorial disputes between the depths and amphibious reef builders had created decades of tension. Traditional arbitration had failed because both species claimed exclusive right to the same underwater territory based on different legal traditions. Jake suggested examining what each species actually needed from the disputed area. The depths required deep water access for their spawning cycles, while the reef builders needed shallow water construction sites for their living cities. The ocean has 3 dimensions, Jake explained to the confused negotiators. Why fight over the same space when you can use different levels of the same area? The solution involved vertical territory sharing that gave the depths exclusive access to deep waters while reserving shallow areas for reef builder construction. Both species could use the same geographic coordinates without interfering with each other's activities. This breakthrough led to the development of dimensional resource sharing as a new diplomatic tool. 3-dimensional thinking resolved conflicts on gas giant platforms, asteroid mining operations, and even interstellar trade route disputes. Jake's reputation as a diplomatic innovator spread throughout the galaxy alongside his engineering fame. Species representatives began requesting human advisors for complex negotiations, while diplomatic academies established courses in adaptive conflict resolution. The success extended beyond resource disputes into trade negotiations and alliance agreements. Human concepts of flexible partnerships challenged the rigid hierarchy systems that had dominated galactic politics for millennia. On the commercial world of Trade Hub 7, Jake helped resolve a complex multi-species trade dispute that had paralyzed commerce for months. Traditional trade law could not address the unique situation where 5 different species had overlapping claims to the same trade routes. Instead of determining which species had legal priority, Jake suggested creating cooperative trade networks that benefited all participants. The solution involved rotating route access, shared transportation costs, and joint security arrangements that actually improved efficiency while reducing individual expenses. The Trade Hub 7 agreement became the model for commercial cooperation throughout the galaxy. Trade disputes that had previously required lengthy arbitration processes now resolved quickly through cooperative negotiation based on mutual benefit rather than competitive advantage. Jake's diplomatic successes caught the attention of the Galactic Council's highest leadership. They offered him the position of Special Advisor for Adaptive Diplomacy, a newly created role that would give him authority to intervene in major interspecies conflicts. Human methods have revolutionized our approach to both engineering and diplomacy, Commander Xyloth explained during the appointment ceremony. Your species brings perspectives that complement our technological advancement with wisdom about cooperation and adaptation. Jake accepted the position while maintaining his responsibilities at the Human Engineering Institute. The combination of technical and diplomatic innovation created synergies that benefited both fields. Engineering projects began incorporating diplomatic considerations, while diplomatic solutions used technical innovation to create previously impossible agreements. The integration of human adaptability principles across multiple disciplines transformed galactic civilization in ways that extended far beyond the original shelter-building demonstration. As Jake prepared for his next assignment, mediating a complex dispute between 7 species over asteroid mining rights, he reflected on how far human influence had spread throughout the galaxy. What had started as a simple construction exercise had become a fundamental shift in how advanced civilizations approached problems. The galaxy was learning that sometimes the most advanced solution was not the most technologically sophisticated one, but the most adaptable and cooperative approach. Human principles had provided the catalyst for this transformation, but the real achievement lay in how different species were combining their unique strengths to create something greater than any individual civilization could accomplish alone. The suspended city on K7742 continued operating as both research station and symbol of what could be achieved when innovation met cooperation. Soon it would be joined by hundreds of similar projects throughout the galaxy, where human-inspired techniques created solutions that previous generations had considered impossible. 1 year after the K7742 demonstration, Jake stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Harmony Station, watching construction ships from 30 different species working together on the galaxy's most ambitious cooperative project. The massive space station would serve as a permanent center for adaptive engineering and diplomatic innovation. The station itself embodied the principles Jake had introduced to the galaxy, instead of rigid geometric sections typical of previous multi-species constructions. Harmony Station grew organically like a living structure. Each species contributed their unique capabilities while adapting to the needs and methods of their partners. Klaxon Precision Engineering provided the structural framework, while Verdani Biological Systems created living support networks throughout the station. Luminary Energy Matrices powered advanced systems, while Depth's Fluid Dynamics managed atmospheric and water circulation. Human adaptive principles coordinated all elements into a harmonious whole. Construction completion ahead of schedule again, reported Chief Engineer Vrex, his compound eyes reflecting satisfaction as he joined Jake on the observation deck. The Klaxon had become one of Jake's closest collaborators, combining insectoid precision with human adaptability to achieve remarkable results. Jake nodded while watching a team of mixed-species workers installing a new docking section. When everyone focuses on what they do best instead of competing for dominance, amazing things happen quickly. The transformation throughout the galaxy exceeded even Jake's optimistic expectations. Species that had maintained suspicious distance for millennia now eagerly collaborated on projects that benefited everyone involved. The old paradigm of zero-sum competition had given way to positive-sum cooperation. Emergency response capabilities had improved dramatically across all sectors. The new rapid deployment shelters could be constructed in minutes rather than hours, saving countless lives during natural disasters and emergency evacuations. Colonial expeditions no longer required massive equipment shipments because adaptive construction techniques used local materials effectively. Trade disputes had virtually disappeared as species learned to identify mutually beneficial solutions rather than fighting over limited resources. The dimensional sharing concepts pioneered at Tethys Deep now resolved territorial conflicts throughout the galaxy without requiring military intervention. Even military strategy had evolved beyond traditional conquest models. Defense alliances now focused on cooperative protection networks that made aggressive expansion both unnecessary and ineffective. Potential conflicts resolved through diplomatic innovation before escalating to military confrontation. Jake received a priority communication from Earth requesting his immediate return for consultation with human government leaders. The message indicated that alien species were now seeking direct diplomatic relationships with humanity rather than working through Galactic Council intermediaries. Earth wants to understand how one human changed galactic civilization so dramatically, Jake explained to Vrex as they reviewed the communication together. They're probably worried about unintended consequences. Vrex clicked his mandibles in what Jake had learned was thoughtful consideration. Human influence has been entirely positive from our perspective. Your species taught us that strength comes from flexibility rather than rigidity. The return journey to Earth took several weeks through the established hyperspace routes. Jake used the travel time to compile comprehensive reports on how human principles had influenced galactic development. The results would surprise Earth's leadership as much as they had surprised the aliens. Humanity had unknowingly possessed capabilities that advanced civilizations had lost or never developed. Thousands of years of technological advancement had led many species toward specialized efficiency while sacrificing adaptive flexibility. Humans brought balance back to galactic civilization. Upon arrival at Earth's orbital stations, Jake found himself greeted by crowds of humans eager to hear about galactic adventures. News reports had followed his achievements, but most people still struggled to understand how basic human survival skills had impressed advanced alien civilizations. The government briefing sessions lasted for days as military leaders, diplomats, and scientists sought to understand the implications of humanity's new galactic status. Earth had transformed from an isolated newcomer into one of the most influential members of the Galactic Council. The aliens are requesting permanent human advisors for major engineering and diplomatic projects, explained Secretary of Galactic Affairs Patricia Liu during the final briefing session. We need to determine how to meet these requests without compromising Earth's own development needs. Jake proposed establishing a galactic exchange program that would benefit both humanity and alien civilizations. Send our best engineers and diplomats to work with alien species while bringing their specialists to Earth. We'll all learn from each other instead of just sharing in one direction. The exchange program launched within months, creating opportunities for unprecedented cooperation between Earth and the galaxy's advanced civilizations. Human students studied alien technologies, while alien researchers learned human adaptability principles. The cross-pollination of ideas accelerated innovation throughout the galaxy. Jake returned to Harmony Station as the first director of interspecies cooperation, a position that gave him authority to coordinate major collaborative projects throughout the galaxy. His first initiative involved establishing permanent research stations on challenging worlds, where different species could test adaptive techniques under extreme conditions. The K7742 station had evolved into a major research center where scientists from dozens of species studied environmental adaptation principles. Similar facilities appeared on ice worlds, desert planets, gas giant moons, and even in deep space environments where cooperation was essential for survival. 5 years after his original 20-minute demonstration, Jake attended the dedication ceremony for the Galactic Cooperation Memorial on K7742. The monument stood beside his original suspended city, which continued operating as a functional research facility and training center. Commander Xyloth delivered the dedication speech. To representatives from over 50 species, the human achievement here demonstrated that advancement comes not from technological superiority alone but from wisdom, adaptability, and cooperation. This memorial honors not just human innovation but the transformation it inspired throughout our galaxy. Jake accepted the honor on behalf of all humanity, while recognizing that the real achievement belonged to every species that had chosen cooperation over competition. The memorial would remind future generations that sometimes the greatest breakthroughs came from the simplest insights applied with creative intelligence. As the ceremony concluded, Jake looked up at his original hammock city swaying gently in the forest breeze. The structure that had taken 20 minutes to build had somehow managed to construct something far more important, a new foundation for galactic civilization based on mutual respect, adaptive thinking, and cooperative achievement. The galaxy had learned that true strength came not from building walls against challenges, but from finding ways to work with whatever circumstances provided. Human principles had shown the way, but the real revolution lay in how different species combined their unique capabilities to create solutions that no single civilization could achieve alone. In the end, the emergency shelter drill had become much more than a test of construction skills. It had become the foundation for a new era of galactic cooperation where diversity was celebrated as strength and adaptation was recognized as the key to survival and prosperity among the stars.